He took my house keys. Just like that. Jingled them once, smiled that old familiar lie, and walked out like he still owned something. I didn't even argue. My silence had more power than his whole swagger. My coffee went cold before my tears did. That's the day I started buying the block. My name's Helen Monroe, 47, divorced, twice if you count the one I had with my expectations. This is the story of how losing a house turned into owning every door that used to shut on me. It started on a Monday that felt like punishment. Rain tapping on the porch like it had a secret to tell. Boxes half-packed, his cologne still floating in the hallway. That expensive nonsense he bought after he stopped complimenting me. He said, "You always overreact." I said, "You always underperform." That's how love dies. One denial at a time. When the door clicked behind him, the silence felt heavy, but not empty. It was pregnant with something new. I wiped my eyes, poured the rest of that cold coffee down the sink, and whispered to the quiet, "All right then, let's get to work." 2 weeks later, I was sleeping on my sister's couch in Eastfield Heights. That part of town everybody said was up and coming, which really meant nobody had come yet. Rent signs on every other porch, grass growing through the sidewalks. But I saw something there. At night, I'd walk past those cracked brick houses, and instead of seeing blight, I saw blueprints. The realtor in me, the one he told to stick to interior design, started to breathe again. My sister Rhonda said, "Helen, you gon' lose your mind staring at those old houses." I told her, "No, baby, I'm finding it." One night, I opened Zillow on her tablet. Screen cracked like my old marriage, and I saw it. A foreclosed duplex, $58,000. Same block he used to drive through, windows up, pretending not to see where he came from. Next morning, I was at the county auction, heels clicking on that dirty courthouse floor like Judgment Day. Men in cheap suits stared. One of them whispered, "She don't look like she belong here." I turned, looked him right in the eye, and said, "Neither do you. Let's see who stays longer." When the gavel hit, the house was mine. $58,000, paid in full. Not because I was rich, but because I had faith and a little severance I refused to spend on pain. Renovation started with a hammer and gospel music. Every nail felt like a hymn, every paint stroke a prayer. I hired young men from the block, boys who used to hang outside the liquor store with nothing but time and trouble. I told them, "You work with me. You learn how to build what nobody can take." They laughed at first. Then payday came, and they didn't miss another morning. By the third month, the duplex looked like hope with fresh siding. I rented one half to a nurse named Lila, single mom, 2 kids, and moved into the other. First night there, I stood on the porch, breathed in that new paint smell mixed with rain, and said to myself, "He took the keys, but baby, I kept the door." Then came Malik, my ex. 3 months too late and one ego too big. He pulled up in that leased Mercedes, leaned on the horn like we were still married. I walked out slow, wearing the same robe he used to call the armor of attitude. He said, "Damn, Helen, you look good. You still mad?" I smiled. "No, I'm employed by peace now." He looked around. "You moved here?" "Own here," I corrected. That's when he saw the duplex sign, Monroe Properties. He blinked like his eyes couldn't process grace. "You serious?" I leaned against the porch rail, sunlight catching the fresh "for rent" banner. "Dead serious, and if you're looking, I got a unit available. First month's triple for old time's sake." He laughed, that fake laugh people use when the joke's on them. Then he said, "You really think this little side project means you won?" I looked him dead in the soul. "No, Malik, I'm not playing your game anymore. I built my own." By Christmas, I'd flipped another house 2 streets down. The profit paid for a third, then a fourth. Before the next summer, I had 5 deeds in my name. People started calling me Miss Monroe from the block. Kids waved when they saw me. Old folks came by with pies. Even the bank manager who used to ignore my emails started calling me for advice. I didn't buy those houses for revenge. I bought them because peace costs property taxes, and I could finally afford both. One night, Rhonda said, "You realize what you're doing, right? You buying the same streets they said we'd never leave." I said, "Exactly, that's the point." We sat on the porch, wine in hand, cicadas singing backup. She asked, "You ever miss him?" I thought about it, about how he used to twist his ring when he lied, how the air felt thinner when he was in the room, how my dreams always had to shrink so his ego could breathe. "No," I said finally. "I miss the woman I could have been sooner." A few weeks later, I got an email from the City Development Board. They wanted to partner, offer grants for minority-owned property initiatives. They said, "We need a local liaison who understands the community." I laughed so hard I cried, because I used to beg that same board to fix the potholes on my street. Now they were asking me how to repave the whole block. That's poetic justice wearing a business suit. The day I signed that partnership contract, Malik texted, "Can we talk?" I ignored it. Then he texted again, "I lost the condo. Need somewhere to stay for a bit." I didn't even blink. I sent him the link to my website, Monroe Properties, apply here, with a short note, security deposit due up front, no exceptions. He never replied. But a week later, his cousin applied. That's when I knew the block had finally shifted in my favor. Months passed. My tenants flourished. One started her own cleaning business. Another got her GED and moved out to college housing. That's when I realized I hadn't just bought property. I'd bought possibility. And sometimes, when the sun sets and the whole block glows gold, I walk down the street, keys jingling, dozens of them now, and whisper, "You took one door. I opened 20. The first time somebody called me landlord, I almost corrected them, because that word used to belong to other people who sent letters in red ink and raised rent like it was a game. But then I thought about it. I'd built something, earned something, and maybe that word could sound different coming from me. By the second year, the block had changed its sound. No more late-night sirens, no more broken glass on the corner. Kids playing double dutch again, their laughter bouncing off the brick walls like music from a better time. I didn't do it alone, but I started the spark. And I didn't light it with speeches or charity events. I lit it with action. With mortgages paid on time, flowers planted in front yards, and tenants who knew their names mattered. One afternoon, I was painting the porch rail of house number 6 when a car slowed down beside me. Music thumping, windows tinted. Then I heard it. "Miss Monroe." I turned around. A young man leaned out the window, maybe 23, hat tilted low. "Name's Darnell," he said. "You hired me when I was just trying to stay out of trouble. I just closed on my first duplex. Thought you should know." I dropped my paintbrush, covered my mouth, and smiled so wide I felt it in my bones. "Baby," I said, "that's generational healing right there." He grinned, held up his keys. "I bought on the next street, thought we could be neighbors." I laughed. "Welcome to the block you helped build." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, same one I'd bought from a thrift store 2 years ago, and opened my journal. Page after page filled with notes, interest rates, renovation costs, timelines, prayers. At the bottom of each page, one sentence repeated, "Don't rebuild for revenge, rebuild for respect." Because revenge fades. But respect compounds, like equity. Then came the news I didn't expect. The city wanted to host a Women in Real Estate panel. They asked if I'd speak. I laughed. "Me, I don't even own a pantsuit that fits." The organizer chuckled. "Miss Monroe, we don't need a suit. We need your story." So I went. The event was downtown, glass towers and catered confidence. When I stepped on stage, all those polished women in heels and pearls turned their heads. I could feel their questions before they asked them. I told them the truth. I'm not supposed to be here. I was supposed to still be crying over a man who thought taking my house keys would keep me locked out of my future. But I found out God keeps spare keys. Laughter. Then silence. the good kind, the kind that listens. I shared numbers, lessons, failures, talked about refinancing with integrity, building trust with tenants, and how dignity has better ROI than greed. When I finished, they stood up, not out of politeness, out of recognition. That night, my phone blew up with messages. Investors, contractors, women who said, "You made me believe I could start again." I sat on my porch, wine glass in hand, and whispered to the wind, "See, Malik, you built my heartbreak. I built my empire." The next morning, I got a call from a familiar number, blocked at first. Then it rang again. Voicemail this time. His voice. Malik. "Hey, Helen. I saw your face on the local news. You look good. Proud of you. Maybe we could..." Click. I hung up before the word talk could finish crawling out of his throat. You can't negotiate with ghosts. You can only outlive them. One Friday evening, while doing inspections, I saw a car I didn't recognize parked in front of house number 4. A woman was standing by the trunk. Maybe late 30s, pink scrubs, tired eyes. "Miss Monroe?" she asked. "Do you take late payments?" I smiled gently. "Depends. Late how?" She looked down, embarrassed. "I just picked up extra shifts. My son's sick and the hospital bills." I stopped her right there. "Baby, breathe. You got receipts?" She nodded, teary-eyed. I said, "Then you got time. I don't do eviction. I do conversation." She started crying, and I thought about how different life felt when compassion was the policy, not the exception. Because power don't mean control. It means stewardship. Later that month, a reporter from the Sentinel came to the block, wanted to do a feature. From heartbreak to housing hero. I told her no at first. I didn't want headlines. I wanted homes. But she insisted. "You've revitalized this neighborhood. People need to hear it." So I said yes, on one condition. They gotta spell every name right. The boys who worked, the women who rent, the grandmas who prayed over this block. She smiled. Deal. When the article came out, the photo showed me in front of my duplex. Paint on my jeans, sunlight behind me, holding a coffee mug that said boss, but make it blessed. Caption read, "She lost a house, then bought the neighborhood." It went viral overnight, and that's when the vultures came. Developers, out-of-town investors with press suits and fake smiles. One called and said, "Miss Monroe, we'd love to buy your portfolio. 7 properties, right? We can make you an offer you can't refuse." I said, "Try me." He offered a number, big one, enough to move anywhere, retire early, live easy. But easy never built legacy. I told him, "Sir, my people can't afford your kind of success. You want this block, you'll have to buy it from my grandkids." He paused. "You sure? Money talks." I smiled into the phone. "So does history." And she louder. Rhonda came by that night with takeout and attitude. "You really turned down that much money?" "Sure did." She shook her head. "You wild." "Maybe, but freedom ain't for sale." We ate on the porch, fried rice and laughter, while the neighborhood lights flickered on like applause. That's when I realized something else. I wasn't just living in this story. I was writing a manual, a blueprint, for every woman who'd ever been told she lost too much to rebuild. 2 months later, the city council invited me to join the Urban Redevelopment Committee. Me, the girl who once couldn't get a bank to take her call, now sitting at the same table deciding which communities deserved funding. And I used that seat well. I pushed for programs that taught credit literacy, landlord ethics, and neighborhood ownership. I made sure they used our faces in their flyers, brown, bold, and unashamed. At one meeting, a councilman said, "Miss Monroe, your story is inspiring, but don't you think your approach is emotional?" I smiled slow, let silence do the heavy lifting, then said, "Sir, if emotion built this block, maybe you should try feeling something too." Even the stenographer chuckled. That night, as I walked home under the streetlights, I thought about my old house, the one he took the keys from. It had been resold twice, I'd heard. Different owners, same curse. Because no home built on lies stays warm for long. I stopped by the fence just to look. Same porch, same chipped mailbox. But it didn't hurt anymore. It was just geography, not grief. I whispered, "Thank you for the eviction notice, Lord. It was just a relocation plan." The morning I bought my 8th house, I didn't celebrate. I made pancakes, thick, buttery ones with blueberries in the shape of my initials, not because I'm fancy, but because joy tastes better when it's homemade. The papers were sitting on my kitchen counter. 8 deeds, 8 stories, 8 chances to prove you can start from broken and still end up branded in blessing. Rhonda said, "You know this block got your fingerprints all over it now, right?" I laughed. "Good. Maybe they'll stop calling it Eastfield Heights and start calling it Helen's Hill." Around that time, something unexpected happened. A letter came, handwritten, postmarked from a rehab center 2 towns over. Return address, Malik Turner. I stared at it for 3 days before opening it, not because I missed him, but because forgiveness deserves timing. When I finally unfolded the paper, his handwriting looked smaller, humbler. He wrote, "Helen, I messed up. You didn't deserve how I left things. I lost everything. House, car, even my pride. But seeing your name everywhere, it gave me hope that maybe people like us can rise again. I'm sorry. Truly. If you can't forgive me, I understand. But if you ever got room for grace, send me a sign. Malik." I folded it back up and sat in silence, because sometimes closure doesn't come with fireworks. Just quiet recognition that the person who broke you finally heard their own echo. I didn't reply. Grace doesn't always need an audience. A week later, I got a call from the local high school. They were hosting a career day and wanted me to speak. Me, the woman who once balanced a checkbook with prayer and duct tape. The auditorium was full of teenagers, loud, restless, half listening. I started with a joke. Who here ever been told you too emotional, too dramatic, too something? Almost every hand went up. I smiled. Good. That means you alive. Just make sure you're dramatic about progress. That got them. Phones went down. Eyes came up. I told them about Malik, about the keys, about the first house, but I ended with something new. The world will hand you eviction notices dressed like heartbreak. But baby, sometimes God's just clearing the land for your foundation. They clapped. Some even stood. And afterward, one girl, maybe 16, came up with tears in her eyes. My mama got evicted last month. We staying with my aunt. Hearing you made me think maybe we could own something one day. I hugged her tight. Not one day, sweetheart, soon. Start learning now. That night, I started a scholarship fund, Keys of Grace, for young girls who'd seen too much loss too early. Because if I could turn grief into ground, so could they. Then, one Thursday evening, I got a visitor. A tall man in a gray suit, nervous smile. He introduced himself. Marcus Turner, Malik's brother. My stomach tightened, but my face stayed calm. He said, "I just came to thank you. Malik told me about your letter. Said it made him get clean." I frowned. I didn't send no letter. He smiled softly. Sometimes silence says enough. We talked a while. He was decent. Same eyes, different soul. As he was leaving, he said, "You know, he's in a halfway house now, trying to get back on his feet." I nodded. Good for him. Then Marcus hesitated. He said he don't expect forgiveness, just hopes you keep shining so he can remember what light looks like. That hit deeper than I expected. Not for him, but for me. Because it reminded me that redemption ain't always about reconciliation. Months passed. The block flourished. We hosted cookouts, block parties, job fairs. Every Sunday, I'd bake pies for the elders and talk business with the youth. Then one Sunday afternoon, I saw a familiar shadow at the edge of the crowd. Malik. He looked older, thinner, but cleaner. Spirit-wise. He waited until the music died down before walking over. "Hey, Helen." I folded my arms. "You here for a plate or a confession?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe both." We sat on the porch steps, the same porch where he once called me too ambitious. Now he couldn't stop looking around at everything ambition built. "I just wanted to see it," he said quietly. "The empire you built from our ashes." I nodded. "And?" He sighed. "And it's beautiful. You're beautiful. Always were." I looked at him. Really looked. The arrogance was gone. The noise was gone. Just a man, humbled by his own storm. "I ain't mad at you, Malik," I said finally. "You were my lesson, and I learned it well." He smiled, eyes wet. "That's fair." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something, an old keychain. "Found this cleaning out my stuff. It's yours. I figured you'd want it back." It was the original key to our first house. Rusty. Bent. I took it gently, turned it over in my palm. "Funny thing," I said. "I don't need it no more." Then I handed it right back. "You keep it. Let it remind you of what pride costs." He nodded slowly. No argument, no tears, just quiet respect. And when he walked away, I swear even the wind exhaled peace. That night, I hung a new sign on the fence of my latest property, Monroe and Sons Community Housing, coming soon. Not because I had sons, but because I'd built enough to make room for every boy who needed guidance. I started hiring again. This time, ex-cons, single fathers, and the ones everybody called too far gone. I told them, if you show up, I'll show you how to build a foundation, brick by brick, belief by belief. They called me Mama Monroe after that. And honestly, I wore that title like a crown. Then came the storm, literally. A hurricane swept through the county that fall. Wind tearing shingles, rain flooding basements. 2 of my properties took heavy damage. Insurance fought me like mercy was optional. But the block, my block, showed up. Tenants brought sandbags. Darnell brought his crew. Rhonda cooked for everybody. We rebuilt together, faster than FEMA, stronger than before. Standing in that rain, hammer in hand, I realized something I never expected. I wasn't just buying the block. I was becoming the block. And that meant something holy. A month later, the mayor's office called. Wanted to honor me at the annual Community Resilience Gala. Said I'd exemplified modern urban renewal through empathy. I just laughed. All I did was mind my business and pay it forward. The night of the gala, I wore a black gown Rhonda found at a thrift store and tailored herself. Gold earrings shaped like tiny keys. When they called my name, I walked up slow, heartbeat steady. The audience stood before I even spoke. I took the mic and said, I didn't do this to be admired. I did this because I was tired. Tired of waiting for permission to build something better. Tired of asking for respect from people who rent their souls. So I stopped asking, and I started owning. The crowd went silent, then roared. And in that sound, applause mixed with faith, I felt every broken piece of my old life dissolve into purpose. After the gala, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Banks, news outlets, talk shows, all of them wanting interviews. One man even said, "We'd love to option your life rights for a series." I told him, "Baby, this story ain't for sale. It's still unfolding." But it made me think, maybe it was time to write my own version before somebody else tried to narrate it wrong. So every morning at sunrise, before the contractors showed up and the world got loud, I sat at my desk with coffee and typed. Not for fame, for clarity. For the girl who used to cry on eviction night floors and pray over overdue bills. For the woman who learned that peace isn't quiet, it's earned. Rhonda came over one day, caught me mid-typing, and said, "So you writing a memoir now?" I smiled. Not a memoir, a manual. She raised a brow. For who? For every woman who's ever been told she needs a man to open doors. We laughed, but she knew I meant it. That night, she brought out a bottle of champagne she'd been saving. To you, she said, the queen of the cul-de-sac. I clinked her glass. To all the women who didn't fold. We just flipped. 2 weeks later, the city launched the Build Back Black initiative, a program modeled after my block. They asked me to lead it. I accepted, on one condition: we don't gentrify, we multiply. They blinked. What's that mean? It means we build wealth that stays where it's planted. We turned old lots into gardens, abandoned houses into community classrooms. And before long, other neighborhoods started calling. I was busier than ever. But for the first time, busy felt blessed, not burned out. Then one morning, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, there stood a girl, no older than 22, holding a baby on her hip and a folder under her arm. She said, "Miss Monroe, I'm here about the internship." I looked her over. Tired eyes, chipped nail polish, determination hiding under nerves. "Come on in, sweetheart." Her name was Tiana, single mother, 2 part-time jobs, trying to learn real estate because she wanted her son to grow up somewhere she actually owned. She reminded me of me, hungry, scared, but still showing up. I took her under my wing, taught her how to read contracts, spot a bad loan, and charm a contractor without losing respect. She caught on quick. Within months, she was running site visits, balancing ledgers, mentoring the same teenage girls I once spoke to. One evening, I found her sitting on the porch, baby asleep beside her, tears rolling down her face. "What's wrong?" I asked. She sniffled. "My ex tried to take the car, said I wouldn't make it without him." I laughed softly. "Sound familiar?" She looked up. "What did you do?" I smiled. "Bought the block." We both laughed through tears. Then I said, "You don't owe him an explanation. Just keep receipts and keep rising." By summer, the Keys of Grace Fund had its first graduate. That same 16-year-old girl who hugged me after the career day? Her name was Renee, and she just closed on her first property with help from our program. She came by the office with her mom, both of them crying, holding up the deed like it was the Holy Grail. I framed a copy and hung it on the wall, right next to my own first one. I told her, "See, I didn't just buy houses, I bought proof." Then one afternoon, while reviewing blueprints for a new duplex, my phone rang again. Marcus, Malik's brother. "Hey, Miss Monroe," he said. "Just wanted you to know." Malik passed his 2-year sobriety mark today. I closed my eyes, exhaled slow. "That's good to hear." "He's working now. Small job at a mechanic shop. Keeps your photo in his locker." The article from the Sentinel. I smiled, but something inside me went still. Not sadness, just the soft sound of an old wound finally closing. "Tell him," I said. "I'm proud of him, truly." Marcus chuckled. "You just did." That night I couldn't sleep, not because of regret, but because peace has a strange kind of silence, like the world finally exhales with you. I stepped outside, barefoot on the porch, moonlight spilling across the block like liquid forgiveness. Every house had a story, every window a victory, and in that moment I whispered, "We did it." Then I felt something, not a breeze, a presence, like my grandmother's voice in the wind saying, "You didn't just build houses, baby, you built inheritance." A few months later, we threw a neighborhood celebration. Barbecue smoke in the air, kids running wild, old music on the speakers. Even the mayor showed up. When he took the mic, he said, "This block used to be a statistic. Now it's a syllabus." He handed me a plaque. The Helen Monroe District. Established 2025. I stood there frozen, crowd cheering, Rhonda screaming like it was the BET Awards. Then tears hit me. Not from pride, but from memory. Because I could still see that first night. Me on my sister's couch, holding a cold cup of coffee, whispering, "All right then, let's get to work." And look what God built from that whisper. When the party died down, I walked to the end of the street. There was one lot left, empty, overgrown, fenced off. It used to be a liquor store where kids wasted hours. I stood there, imagining. Then I smiled. This, I said to myself, gonna be a resource center. Classes, mentorship, maybe a childcare corner. Rhonda heard me talking to myself and yelled from down the block, "You already planning your next project?" I grinned. A queen don't retire. She reinvests. That night, I finally sat down to finish the last chapter of my book. The title came to me easy. He took the keys. I bought the block. I wrote, "If you ever lose everything you thought made you safe, the house, the man, the name, remember this. Safety isn't in walls. It's in willpower. And you can rebuild willpower anywhere." When I typed the final line, I didn't cry. I laughed, because this wasn't a sad story anymore. It was a syllabus for survival. 2 weeks later, the first pre-orders went live, and within 24 hours, it sold out. Bookstores called, podcasts invited me. Even the same TV producer who once said, "We're looking for someone younger," emailed again, "Miss Monroe, we'd love to adapt your story into a feature." I replied, "You can't adapt what's still evolving. Call me when we start the next chapter." That same week, I got another letter from Malik, short this time. "I just bought my first car with cash. Thank you for showing me how to rebuild right. I'll never forget that porch talk. M." I folded it neatly and slipped it between the pages of my manuscript, because some stories don't end, they just change tone. And me? I keep walking these same streets every morning, nodding to my tenants, waving to the kids, smiling at the sky. Not because everything's perfect, but because it's finally peaceful. Every sound, every face, every brick is proof that you can't take what God already deeded in your name. So when people ask, "Miss Monroe, how'd you do it?" I just smile and say, "Baby, I didn't chase revenge. I chased redemption. And it came with a mortgage." You know what nobody tells you about success? It's quiet. Not the flashy kind that needs likes or applause. The kind where your phone don't ring with bad news anymore. Where you wake up, make coffee, and the air don't feel like survival. I didn't realize how far I'd come until that morning I couldn't remember my last panic attack. The block was alive that day. Kids laughing, hammers clinking, gospel humming from somebody's porch radio. The kind of sound that reminds you healing has rhythm. Then came the call that changed everything again. Not from Malik, not from the bank, from Harvard University. They'd read about my story, the keys of Grace Fund, the Monroe District, and wanted me to guest lecture at their urban development seminar. Me. The woman once told she was too emotional for management. I nearly dropped my phone. Rhonda screamed louder than me. "You better go teach them how we really do gentrification with grace." Cambridge was cold, but the room was warm, packed with students, future planners, economists, architects, most of them looking at me like I was the myth they read about. I took the mic and said, "I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to warn you. If you ever think numbers matter more than neighbors, you already failed." They were silent. Then someone raised their hand. "Miss Monroe, how did you know where to start?" I smiled. "With heartbreak." You could feel the air shift, because that's the truth. Most blueprints start in pain, but only some people know how to draw light from it. Afterward, professors lined up to shake my hand. One of them said, "You've turned social equity into an art form." I said, "No, baby. I just turned my ex's exit into a business plan." They laughed, but I meant it. That trip reminded me that revenge isn't always about payback. Sometimes it's just proving to yourself you were never the problem. When I got home, Rhonda had a surprise waiting. A shiny bronze plaque nailed to my porch post. Monroe Estate, EST 2021. I rolled my eyes. "You trying to make me sound fancy now?" She grinned. "You are fancy. Just the kind that builds foundations." We sat on the porch sipping lemonade. She said, "You ever think about doing more? Maybe politics?" I laughed so hard I almost spilled my drink. Girl, I barely trust my mailman. You think I'm about to trust city council? We both cracked up, but deep down I knew she was serious, and part of me, the part that still dreamed like a rebel, wondered if maybe it was time to go bigger. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the governor's office. They wanted to nominate me for the State Housing and Community Empowerment Board. I reread it twice, thinking it had to be a prank. It wasn't. Rhonda said, "See? Look at God networking on your behalf." I accepted, because maybe the only way to fix the system that failed me was to sit at its table and bring my own chair. The first board meeting was chaos. Old men in gray suits talking over each other like their mouths were clocks running out of relevance. When it was my turn, I waited. Patience can be louder than interruption. Then I said, "Gentlemen, I came to talk about roofs, not politics. People can't dream under ceilings that leak." The room went quiet, and just like that, I had their attention. That same week, Tiana, my intern, closed on her first solo renovation, a duplex right off Lincoln Street. She invited me to see it. When I walked in, I saw my younger self in every nail and paint streak. She said, "What you think, Miss Monroe?" I smiled, eyes misting. "I think you bought your piece, baby. One wall at a time." Her little boy, Marcus Jr., toddled over holding a plastic hammer. "Look, Auntie Helen, I fix house." I laughed so hard I cried, because somewhere in that tiny voice was the sound of generational wealth starting early. Then something happened that I wasn't ready for. CNN called. They wanted to film a short documentary, From Divorce to District, the Helen, Monroe's Story. I almost said no, but Tiana said, "Miss Monroe, people need to see this, not just hear it." So I agreed, on my terms. No makeup lights, no sad piano music, just truth and sunlight. The crew spent 3 days on the block, filming my tenants, my staff, the gardens, the laughter. They even caught the moment I fixed a broken fence myself. When the interviewer asked, "Why not hire someone?" I said, "Because every nail I drive reminds me I still can." The documentary aired on a Sunday night. I didn't plan to watch it, but the neighborhood threw a screening party anyway. Lawn chairs, popcorn, projector on the side of my first duplex. When my face appeared on that wall, the crowd erupted. Kids shouting, elders crying, music swelling. And there I was, watching my own story surrounded by every soul who made it possible. At the end, the screen faded to black with my quote, "He took the keys. I bought the block." They cheered so loud the streetlights flickered like applause. 2 days later, my inbox exploded. Emails from everywhere, church groups, schools, even Netflix asking for a meeting. But what touched me most wasn't the fame. It was the message from a woman named Clara James in Detroit. "Miss Monroe, my husband left me last year. I cried through your whole interview, then I opened a savings account. Thank you for reminding me, broken don't mean done." I sat on my porch reading that, tears rolling down, whispering, "Lord, if that was the only person this reached, it was worth it." Then one evening near sunset, I was walking back from house number 9 when I noticed something new. A little girl drawing with chalk on the sidewalk. Colorful houses, smiling stick figures. She looked up and said, "Miss Helen, I drew your houses." I smiled. "You sure did. That me with the big hair?" She giggled. "Uh-huh, and that's my mama and me moving in next week." Her mom waved from the porch. A new tenant, single parent, nervous smile. I waved back, heart full, because that was it. The whole purpose, right there in pink chalk. That night, I wrote a single line in my journal. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you lift while you're still here. The next morning, I started making calls. City planners, investors, community builders. Because if one block could change, maybe a whole city could. The idea was simple, but powerful. A coalition of women landlords, pooling resources, flipping blocks, creating housing without displacement. I called it Her Realty Alliance, because ownership should always start with her. Within 6 months, we had 12 members, all women of color. Nurses, teachers, single moms, retirees, every one of them carrying their own story of loss turned leadership. We met in living rooms and church basements, drawing maps and sharing spreadsheets. And when our first collective project broke ground, a 20-unit affordable housing row, I cried right there in the dirt. Because this was it, the real revenge, not the shouting kind, the building kind. That evening, as I stood watching the sun set over my street, Rhonda came up beside me. "You ever gonna slow down?" she asked. I smiled. "Maybe when they stop calling it the Monroe Method." She laughed. "Girl, they already putting that on flyers." We both cracked up until tears turned into joy, and in that golden hour, standing between everything I'd lost and everything I'd built, I whispered to myself, from heartbreak to housing, look at God. Some nights I still wake up before dawn, not out of worry, out of memory. Old habits die slower than pain. For years I'd wake up thinking something was missing. Rent unpaid, love unreturned, peace postponed. Now when I wake, it's gratitude that shakes me first. I walk to my porch barefoot, morning air thick with jasmine and possibility. The block is still. The kind of stillness that means survival paid off. And that's when I see it. Something new. A for sale sign 2 streets over. Big house, boarded windows, forgotten history. I smile, whispering, guess the Lord just added another verse. By that afternoon, I'm walking through the property with my notepad, phone light on, heart steady, dust everywhere, floors groaning like old gossip. But I can see it, what it could be. Tiana tags along, baby Marcus on her hip. She laughs. "Miss Monroe, you sure this one ain't cursed?" I grin. If it is, we gon' turn the curse into a contract. We find old photos scattered on the floor, black and white pictures of families who used to live there, kids on porches, Sunday dresses, laughter trapped in time. I pick one up and whisper, "Y'all coming home?" Because that's the thing about restoration. It ain't just wood and nails, it's resurrection. 2 weeks later, construction starts. The crew calls me boss lady, though I tell them, nah, I'm just the head dreamer. We pull rotten boards, repaint walls, replace sorrow with sunlight. I'm there every day, hard hat, steel boots, clipboard. And every night I pray over that house. Let whoever walks through these doors feel worthy again. By the time we're done, it don't just look new, it feels new. We turn it into a transitional home for single mothers escaping bad situations. 5 units, all furnished, all rent-free for the first 6 months. I name it House of Keys. At the opening ceremony, Tiana holds the ribbon, tears in her eyes. She whispers, "You're really doing God's work out here." I smile. Baby, I'm just cashing his checks. That same week, my phone rings again. This time, a number from New York. A woman introduces herself. "Hi, I'm Ava Brooks, senior editor at Essence magazine." I laugh. "You better not be prank calling me, Ava." She chuckles. "Oh, I'm real, and so is your impact. We're naming you one of our Women of the Year." I sit there frozen, heart thumping, slow but deep. Because 15 years ago, I couldn't even afford the subscription. Now my story's the headline. The photo shoot happens right on my block. No studios, no filters, just sunlight, fresh paint, and real people. My tenants, my crew, my girls from the program. We all stand in front of the House of Keys sign, laughing. The photographer says, "Say legacy." I grin and say, "Say leverage." When the issue drops, the cover reads, "The woman who bought her own closure." I frame it not out of vanity, out of victory. But fame is funny. For every flower you get, somebody somewhere starts counting your petals. One morning, I walk into the community office and find a letter on my desk. Anonymous, typed, short. "You're not saving the neighborhood, you're changing it. Some of us liked it better before." I sit down slow, because I know that tone. Fear, pretending to be nostalgia. Later that week at a city hearing, One man stood up and said, "Miss Monroe's projects are pricing people out." I let him talk. Then I stood up and said, "Sir, with respect, people have been priced out of peace for decades. If you think progress is the problem, maybe you ain't the one paying the real cost." The room went quiet. Then applause started. Not loud, but sure. Change ain't always comfortable, but comfort never built anything holy. That night, I sat on my porch thinking about it all, about the block, the blessings, the backlash, and I remembered something my grandma used to say, "Every blessing come with maintenance, baby." So I adjusted my heart, tightened my peace, and got back to work. A month later, her Realty Alliance broke ground on its second development, a 40-unit cooperative run entirely by women investors. We called it the Grace Gardens, each unit named after a woman who changed the neighborhood. They named the central courtyard after me, Monroe Square. I told them, "Don't name it for me, name it for the mindset." But they insisted, so I accepted with a quiet smile and a whispered prayer, "May nobody ever forget what pain can plant." Meanwhile, Malik's brother, Marcus, kept in touch. He'd started volunteering at the House of Keys, fixing leaky pipes, installing lights. He said, "Feels good to do something that matters." I nodded. Purpose is the best paycheck. Then one day, while we were painting a hallway, he said, "You know, Malik's working steady now, got a small apartment. He wanted me to tell you he's sorry. Again." I smiled. "That's nice. Tell him I hope he likes the view from Redemption." Marcus grinned. "You ever think maybe forgiveness is the final key?" I looked at him, brush dripping paint. "Maybe. But some doors don't need reopening." Weeks passed. Then one. Quiet evening, I got a package. No sender listed. Inside, a key ring. 20 keys, each labeled with a street name, my properties, and one tiny engraved plate that read, "To the woman who built more than houses." No note, no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew who it was from. I held those keys and cried, not sad tears, grateful ones. Because life had come full circle, not with revenge, but redemption that didn't need to knock twice. That night, I walked the block, streetlights glowing gold, kids riding bikes, laughter spilling from open windows. Every house had light in it, real light. And as I walked, I whispered the same thing over and over. Bought the block, but God paid the difference. The next morning, I hosted our first ever Legacy Breakfast, a monthly gathering for women homeowners to share wisdom over pancakes and praise music. Dozens showed up, notebooks in hand. We talked about everything: insurance, boundaries, bad exes, good credit. One woman said, "Miss Monroe, you make it sound easy." I laughed. "Easy? Baby, this ain't easy. But it's easier than waiting for somebody else to see your worth." We all clapped, because that was the sermon. Plain and simple. When everyone left, I stood in the doorway, sunlight kissing my shoulders. In the quiet, I said, "Lord, if I never build another thing, thank you for letting me rebuild myself." But deep down, I knew I wasn't done. Because vision don't retire, it just relocates. The first morning of fall came with that kind of breeze that smells like fresh paint and change, leaves skipping across driveways, air sweet with wood smoke and nostalgia. I stood on my porch with my coffee and thought, this block breathes now. You ever watch something you built start to live on its own? That's the kind of pride money can't buy. Kids walking to school in clean sneakers, elders sitting on porches swapping recipes and gossip, mothers watering gardens they used to pass by afraid to dream about. It felt like the neighborhood finally exhaled. Then one Friday evening, as the sun dipped low, a car pulled up slow in front of house number 3. Old sedan, familiar rhythm in the engine. Malik. He stepped out, slow, like a man approaching holy ground. He looked better, clearer eyes, softer edges, shoulders that finally knew humility. I didn't move, just sipped my coffee and let him walk up the path he once swore I'd never walk without him. He took off his hat. "Evening, Helen." I nodded. "Evening." Silence stretched between us like unspoken years. He said, "I just came to see it, to say, I'm proud of you." I didn't say thank you, didn't say it's okay. I just looked at him. The man who once slammed the door on me, now standing in front of a door I built. He smiled a little, almost shy. "I opened a small auto shop down in Southridge. I'm doing all right." I nodded. "That's good." He glanced around the street. "You changed everything." I said, "No, Malik. I reminded it who it was before the world forgot." That shut him up for a while. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I wrote you something. Not another apology. Just reflection." I hesitated, then took it. He nodded, turned, and left, walking down the same street he once drove away from like he'd never look back. That night, I opened the letter. Helen. Sometimes losing you was the only thing that could make me find myself. I used to think strength was control. Now I know it's correction. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you. Not for what you built, but for what you refused to destroy to get there. You taught me that peace ain't payback. It's purpose. I pray you keep building light. M. I folded it slow. Then I cried. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't. That's how you know healing is complete, when you can touch your past and it don't burn. The next day, I found Tiana painting a mural with the neighborhood kids on the side of the House of Keys. It showed a woman holding a ring of golden keys, surrounded by homes, gardens, and smiling faces. Underneath, in bright letters, "From hurt to home." I just stood there, speechless. Tiana grinned. "You like it?" I said, "Baby, that's the story without the words." We stood there together, paint on our shoes, pride in our hearts. That night, Rhonda came over for dinner. Gumbo, cornbread, and laughter. She said, "So what you gonna do now, Madam Builder?" I smiled. "I'm thinking about starting a foundation." She raised a brow. "You mean another one?" "This time bigger, national. The Monroe Foundation for Women and Property, teaching ownership, not just occupation." Rhonda grinned. "From eviction notice to foundation president. I can't wait to tell Mama you finally beat her prayer record." We both laughed until tears came. The next few months were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and late-night visions. I hired lawyers, accountants, and, most importantly, women who understood the mission because they'd lived it. By winter, the foundation was official. We launched with one motto printed on every brochure: "Own something, even if it's just your piece." It went viral. Churches, schools, and shelters started calling for workshops. Even banks wanted training on empathy-based lending. Imagine that, me teaching the same institutions that once denied me. One day, I walked into a conference downtown full of young women taking notes while I spoke. Afterward, a woman came up crying. She said, "Miss Monroe, I was in a shelter 2 years ago watching your story on YouTube. Now I'm a homeowner." I hugged her tight, whispered, "You didn't just buy a house, baby. You bought your story back." The block was booming. Every month, another house flipped, another dream financed. But success never stopped me from sweeping my own porch. One afternoon, while doing just that, a young man walked by and said, "Miss Monroe, you ever think about running for office?" I laughed. "Why, so folks can argue with me about potholes instead of purpose." He grinned. "You'd win, though." I winked. "Baby, I already did." A few weeks later, we hosted the first annual Keys of Grace Gala. Black tie, local band, red carpet rolled out right down Main Street. Everyone came. Tenants, investors, city officials, even the mayor again. The air was electric. Laughter, gospel, gratitude. We raised over $500,000 that night for new women-owned housing projects. When it was my turn to speak, I took the mic, looked out at the crowd, and said, Y'all, I didn't come here tonight as a success story. I came here as a survivor's testimony. Everything you see, every brick, every bloom, started with one heartbreak I refused to waste. The room went quiet. Then applause broke out, rising like a choir. And somewhere in that sound, I swear I heard my younger self whisper, "Finally." After the gala, I stayed behind to lock up. The street was empty but peaceful. That's when I saw a small shadow by the House of Keys mural, a little girl with a notebook. She looked up. "Miss Helen, I want to be like you." I smiled. "No, baby, be like you. Just make sure you own what you build." She nodded, grinning, and skipped away. And right there, in that quiet moment, I realized my life had already multiplied beyond me. Later that night, I went home and poured a glass of wine, sat by the window watching the moonlight hit my street like a spotlight. I thought about every no that became a new door, every heartbreak that turned into housing, every goodbye that became a gateway, and I whispered, "If you only knew, Lord, if you only knew how close I came to giving up." Then I smiled, because he did know. That's why he sent the storm, so I'd learn how to build higher ground. Before heading to bed, I looked at that box of keys again. 20 keys, 20 miracles. But this time, I added one more, a small golden charm shaped like a heart. Because even in revenge stories, love deserves a room. I closed the box, set it on the mantel, and said softly, "He took the house keys, but he gave me the blueprint." Some endings don't look like sunsets. They look like mornings that never stopped coming. That's how I feel now, like my life finally found its daylight and decided to stay. It's been 5 years since the first house, 5 years since he took the keys and I started buying doors. The block is alive. The foundation is thriving. And my peace is priceless. Today's special. The city's dedicating a mural downtown, 10 stories high, to honor community leaders who changed the Oz landscape. They called it Walls of Grace, and they're unveiling my portrait last. Rhonda picked out my outfit, a cream suit, gold pin in the shape of a key. She said, "You better stand like you own the skyline." I laughed. "Baby, I just paid the taxes." We rode in silence for a while, the city rolling past like a movie reel. I remembered every version of me that once sat behind this same steering wheel, crying, praying, doubting. Now here I was, heading to a ceremony with my name on concrete. The crowd's already gathered when we arrive. News cameras, choirs, kids waving homemade signs that read, "Thank you, Miss Helen." The mayor shakes my hand, photographers flash, but I'm barely there. My eyes are on the mural still covered by white cloth, fluttering in the wind like a curtain before truth. He gives a speech about transformation and hope, mentions the Monroe method like it's a legend. Then he says, "And now, the woman who turned eviction into evolution, Miss Helen Monroe." They pull the cord, and there she is, me. 10 stories tall, painted in soft golds and browns, holding a ring of keys that shimmer when sunlight hits the wall. Behind me, houses, flowers, smiling faces, and at the bottom, in bold letters, "She bought her piece, then passed it on." The crowd erupts, cameras flash, and I just stand there, hands over my heart, whispering, "Look at God's handwriting." After the ceremony, I walked down the block, same one where I once stood invisible. People stop me every few feet. "Miss Monroe, you changed my life. Thank you for believing in us. Because of you, I bought my first house." Every story is a seed I didn't even know I planted. Then I feel a tap on my shoulder. It's Marcus, Malik's brother. He's smiling, holding a little boy by the hand. "Miss Helen, thought you'd want to meet my nephew." The child looks up, bright eyes, gap-toothed grin. "This is Marcus Jr.," he says, "Malik's son." My breath catches. I kneel down, smile gentle. "Well, hey there, young man." He grins wider. "Daddy says you a superhero." I laugh through the lump in my throat. Your daddy gave me a reason to fly. Marcus squeezes my shoulder. He's doing good, Helen. He couldn't come today, but he told me to tell you he named his shop after you, Helen's Auto and Repair. I blink, stunned. He didn't. He did. Says every car that leaves that garage got a drive with dignity. I laugh, the deep kind that carries healing in its echo. Tell him I'm proud, and tell him, thank you for keeping the name clean. Marcus nods. I will. Then he looks at the mural and whispers, you really did buy the block. I smile. No, baby, I bought time, so the next generation don't have to rent theirs. That night, after the crowd disperses, I sit alone in the middle of Monroe Square. The lights are soft. The air hums like memory, and I think about every version of Helen that existed before this one. The broken wife, the sleeping dreamer, the tired worker, the silent fighter, the woman who thought losing him meant losing home. I whisper to her, you were wrong, baby. You were the home all along. Later, back on my porch, Rhonda pours us 2 glasses of red wine. She says, you realize you're a living proverb now, right? I chuckle. If they quote me in church, tell them to spell my name right. We sit there watching the street. Golden lights, laughter, barbecue smoke, music from somewhere down the block. The kind of night that feels like reward. Rhonda leans back. You ever think about writing another book? I smile. This one writing itself. She grins. What you gon' call it? I look out at the houses, the gardens, the joy blooming everywhere. Maybe blueprints for grace. A week later, I get a letter from a girl in Chicago. She wrote in purple pen, Dear Miss Monroe, I'm 16. My mama and I just got evicted. We saw your story online and started saving change in a jar called Helen Money. One day, we can buy our own house. Thank you for showing us it's possible. I read it 3 times. Then I mailed her my old brass keychain, the one I kept from my first duplex, with a note that said, keep it close. The world still opens. A month later, House of Keys expanded. New funding, new city, new beginnings, Atlanta, Detroit, New Orleans, Baltimore. Everywhere there was pain, we built possibility. Tiana ran the Southern Division now, sharp, steady, and kind. She called me Mama Monroe in every email signature. Renee, my first scholarship girl, started her own podcast, From Rent to Rise. And those boys I hired at the beginning, they had their own construction firm now. They still sent me Christmas cards. On the last one they wrote, we're still building, boss lady. And me? I started taking slower walks, not to check on progress, to witness peace, to see what stillness looks like after all the noise is gone. Some mornings I catch my reflection in the cafe window across the street. Gray streaks in my hair, smile lines deep, eyes softer now. That's not age. That's evidence. Every story needs a final chapter, but mine feels more like an opening, because legacy doesn't end when you rest. It keeps walking the streets you built. I sit down at my desk one evening, same desk, same chipped mug, and start writing again. Not about real estate or heartbreak, about inheritance. I write, some people inherit land, others inherit lessons. I inherited both, but I had to buy them first. Before bed, I open that box of keys one last time. Each one gleams under the lamplight, proof that pain can be productive. Then I add one final key, small, silver, engraved with one word, peace, because that's the door I walk through now. I close the lid, smile, and whisper, thank you, God, for every locked door that led me home. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.